Hello and welcome to Philm Phuckery, the unhinged podcast where I romanticize the villains, ship anything with queer attention, and obsess over films that are either genius or deeply cursed, sometimes both. I'm your host, Spencer Jones, and this season we're diving headfirst into the chaotic comfort that is the MCU. As usual, we'll be talking about the villain effectiveness, the gay undertones, the logic, the technicalities, and of course, the most chaotic moment. So let's jump into it. This week we are on Ant-Man, which is a very, very good movie. So let's just go for it. The main villain in this movie is Darren Cross, who is fine. I don't really like him, honestly. He's like too crazy for me and like not in an endearing way. He just is he's just like, I don't know, a typical white man who wants money and a super soldier weapon type thing. Like, he doesn't care about lives that he's taking or anything. It's like effective in showing that people are trying to create the PIM tech as well as other people are trying to create super soldier serums. It feels overdone, the trope of like the bad guy trying to take the serum or like recreate the serum but is failing and is like mad at everyone for not helping him. I don't know. I just don't really like Darren Cross, honestly, but I do think that he's cuckoo bananas, like absolutely actually insane. He's kind of creepy too. But anyway, I do think it's funny though. I never really paid attention to when he's showing all of the investors the Yellow Jacket commercial. I never really paid attention to the commercial because I was like, oh, it's just explaining what the Yellow Jacket is. It's a weapon. But I was paying attention to it this rewatch because I realized that it sounds like just a generic commercial and it sounds just like it's trying to promote the product, but it's kind of like fake promoting it as a peacekeeping thing when really what it is it's allowing billionaires to do things stealthily or like unseen, and it's not for peace at all. It's literally like, this is a weapon of peace, and it's like blowing up things in the background. I didn't really pay attention to it before, but paying attention to it, it's kind of silly, the contrast between those two, I think. Speaking of Darren being cuckoo bananas, I think it's wild that he's working with the new Hydra, and it's kind of scary and really sad that Hydra still exists. Like, they took down S.H.I.E.L.D., they took down Hydra, and genuinely cut off one head and two more shall grow back. You know, Hydra is still around, and that's pretty scary and kind of sad because they worked really hard. Like, Steve worked so hard to get rid of Hydra, and for what? But anyway, I do find it kind of interesting, and I don't know if it's just that it's common knowledge or that I've seen the movie before, but I think it's interesting that Darren it didn't even occur to him that he would have to put the living organism he was trying to shrink into a contraption. If you can shrink inanimate objects, put the living organism in an inanimate object and shrink that. I feel like that just makes sense. I don't know why it took him so long. I mean, yes, I've seen the movies, so I know that that's how it is. So maybe that's why I know. But I also feel like he wasn't really doing all of the tests that he could have done, because in that one scene where he brings out, I think it was 34C or something like that, and it's a lamb, I think. So he tested it 34 times, the lambs, by the way. And then immediately after he tests it, he says, okay, bring out 35C, which tells me that he's tested it 34 times, about to test it 35 times. But also he did nothing in between those tests to fix the problem. He's just like, okay, bring out the next one. We're going to try it again. But like, why would you not change anything in between the tests? If that one didn't work, doing it the same way again wouldn't work either. So I feel like that's also what took him so long, is he just wasn't trying a whole bunch of new things between each tests. And that's kind of what I mean too when I say he does not care about the lives that he takes. Like, he doesn't give a fuck that he's just killing lambs just to kill them, because that's really what it is. I've also always really found it interesting in the scene where he is showing the investors the Yellow Jacket and Hope and Hank are there. Well, first of all, I really like the quote where he says, what do you call a man who can arm the most powerful weapon in the world? The most powerful man in the world. He's a bad guy, but that was kind of a tough thing to say. Anyway, that scene, I find it really interesting when he is like about to shoot Hank and Hope is telling him that the particles are making his brain chemistry different, or like they're doing something to his brain and she can help him. I always found that part interesting because it just doesn't feel accurate. Like, I think he's always been a little bit cuckoo bananas. He's always been a little crazy. I just feel like Hope was trying to make him feel like he needed to depend on her, do you know? which I think is interesting and very quick thinking on her part. So well done. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I just feel like, why would the particles mess with his brain like that? It doesn't make sense. So if she's just trying to be like, I can help you, please put down the gun. It's okay. You're not crazy. But like, he literally is. Like, it's not the particles. Anyway, the last thing I have before I want to stop talking about Darren, because I don't really like him that much, is the last scene that we see him in. He's in the yellow jacket suit and Scott is destroying the suit and he starts to implode on himself, I guess, or like little bits of him are shrinking. The scream that he lets out haunts me. I don't know why. It's so icky and guttural and it's like muffled by the mask. I don't know. Something about that scream actually haunts me. And I just wanted to point that out. Maybe that's why I don't like Darren, but he's like fine, I guess, as a villain. I don't know. Who cares? Not me. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the gay undertones. There weren't a whole lot in this movie, and I'll talk about why I feel that in a little bit. But the one that I do feel pretty strongly about, and unfortunately is one-sided, but I feel like Luis loves Scott so much. That's his boy. He's ride or die for Scott. And I don't know, I think they're kind of cute together. They're living together after Scott gets out and he goes to pick him up from the prison and he's so excited to see his boy and they're just best buddies. And I feel like Luis really loves Scott. And it's kind of sad that Scott doesn't love him back. He's just really focused on Hope. I don't blame him. But I just feel like Luis wants what's best for Scott and he wants to be able to provide that for him. Do you know what I mean? He's not able to because all he knows is to be a criminal and it's so hard for criminals to get jobs. So Luis is like, I have a way for you to be with your daughter. I just want you to be happy and be happy with your daughter. But the only way I know how to help you do that is by being a criminal, which I guess worked out in the end, but barely. He just loves Scott so much. He gets so excited when he's like, Scott, I got a job for you. And he's like really extra excited when he's like, the Avengers are looking for you. He just wants what's best for him. And I see it as gay. I could be wrong, but I think it's really sweet. Speaking of Scott and his daughter, though, the reason why I didn't feel any really gay undertones, not only just because Scott and Hope are like the main points of romance in this movie, but I also feel like the point of this movie is a father-daughter relationship. So it's Hank and Hope and Scott and Cassie. And I think it's really sweet when you focus on it like that. It just shows the way that Hank and Scott really just want to be close to their kids, but they keep messing up and that's life and it happens, but they're trying their best. And Cassie and Hope like still love them. I just think it's very sweet. I think it is the main aspect of this movie is the father-daughter relationship. There's not really, besides Hope and Scott, a lot of romance. I think it's really cool too when Scott does get put into the quantum realm and it's like his love for Cassie that brings him back. It's so sweet, but it's so sad to think about the fact that all he wanted to do was watch his daughter grow up and he missed kind of all of her childhood because he was in prison and then he was in the quantum realm when everyone got blipped and didn't get brought back for another, like, I think over 5 years, honestly. No, it was right before the 5 years was up because there was a memorial. I don't know. It was like a few years at least. So he missed like a lot of Cassie's life and it's pretty sad. But anyway, on a lighter note though, before we move on, I really like at the end, he saves Cassie and he's kind of like helping Paxton save Cassie, I guess, or Paxton's helping him really, let's be honest. But I like that after that, it shows them having dinner together and Paxton is helping Scott stay out of jail. And I just think it's really sweet the way that they're all able to get along after that. It's kind of sad that it took them that long because like Scott has always been trying to do what's best for Cassie. I feel like they just didn't see it, but it's nice that they finally do see it so Scott can spend time with her and not be seen as like a bad guy. And I think it's really cool how Paxton and Scott become friends. I think that's really sweet as well. I think it shows more in Ant-Man and the Wasp too. But anyway, moving on to the logic. The first point that I had is when the movie first starts, we see Howard and Peggy and Hank are all in S.H.I.E.L.D. And Peggy and Howard are pretty old. Like Peggy's got gray hairs and Howard's fully white haired, I think. I don't know. And Hank is like a young man. I think it's really interesting to show us that Peggy and Howard, we know that they founded S.H.I.E.L.D. And we know now that Hank is working for S.H.I.E.L.D., but it also gives us kind of a timeline because we see that Peggy and Howard are so much older than Hank. So it kind of shows that like when they were establishing S.H.I.E.L.D., Hank was still probably a kid or like a teenager or something. Like he was still pretty young. He could have been the continuation of it. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting to see them all in a room together. It felt like for me, it put into perspective the timeline of things like when S.H.I.E.L.D. was created, when he left, how old he is compared to Peggy and Howard. Going back to Louise, and before I talk about the logic questions that I have for him, I just want to say that he's probably my favorite character in this movie. He's so ADHD coded and he's so silly. And I love when we first see him and he's like, oh, my girl left and my mom died and my dad got deported, but I got the van. And the way that he tells stories is just so funny. It gives very ADHD and I really love that. But anyway, the question that I have, and I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but I'm wondering why they didn't continue on with this. I guess it was like a very minor storyline to me, but okay, let me just talk about it. So Louise is like crazy strong. He was the only one who was able to knock out Peachy. He knocked out all of the guards and like Darren's henchmen or whatever with one punch consistently. That's all it took for him. And he didn't even like, you know, in movies when people will like punch and they're like, ouch, my hand hurts. Like he didn't do that. I've always assumed that that was going to lead somewhere in the MCU. And I guess we still have time. I thought that that was going to lead to him being some form of special in some way, or he would become like Ant-Man's sidekick or something. And it just hasn't happened yet, which feels really weird. Like, why would you make him like low-key inhumanly strong for what? And they don't even talk about it. Like, it just feels weird. And I'm just wondering why they would do that. Speaking of Louise, though, I do feel like he told Baskin-Robbins that Scott was a criminal. So that way Scott would do the job. I just feel like logically that would make sense. I guess we don't know how long Scott has been working at Baskin-Robbins, but it just feels like the timing was way too perfect. And it kind of is like, if you knock him down, he will want to get back up. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels very purposeful that Louise was like, oh no, Scott, you're home. And here's everybody here ready to talk to you about this new job. You know, I think he told. Then Scott does agree to do the job, right? And he goes to go rob Hank. I'm wondering when he became so knowledgeable about the safe and the fingerprints and like the metal of the safe or whatever, because it explained him to be this like computer guy and all he did was leak things about a company and like give money back to the people, which was a very good crime. But that is like a tech guy thing, right? And he did, I think, break into the guy's house because he put the car in the pool. But why would he know about putting, what is it, glue on the tape with a ring and heating it up to get a fingerprint? Where did he learn that stuff? I'm wondering. Maybe it was in prison, but I just feel like the knowledge of the safe and the kind of metal it is and how to cool it off so it expands and explodes, and putting down the blow-up mattress and putting up the comforter so like the screws don't hit him. I don't know. It was still a really cool scene. I loved that he knew all of that, but like I'm just wondering where he would learn that if that's not, like, he's a computer guy, you know? Anyway, another question I have is why people are only interested in the Ant-Man suit and not the technology of controlling all of the ants in the world, I'd assume. I understand wanting to create a super soldier type thing, like a person being a weapon. That's like the main idea of a lot of the Marvel movies. But I feel like though they shouldn't, it would be pretty easy to weaponize ants. Maybe they don't know that Hank has that technology because they're so focused on the Ant-Man suit. But I'm just wondering why no one is trying to replicate that as well, or even instead of. It feels like it might be easier and more science-based in things that we already know to be true. Like the Pym particles are a science that doesn't exist other than Hank having the science. You know what I mean? But I feel like the ant science exists. I'd imagine. I don't know. Because he says that he taps into like the olfactory senses or something like that to tell them what to do. I don't know. It just seems like an easier thing to put your mind to. But I guess it's not like the weapon that they're looking for. But anyway, speaking of, I'm wondering as well if the ants care that they're being taken control of. Like maybe ants don't have minds the way that I'm thinking that they do. But I just feel like if one day you're just trying to get food to your colony and you're carrying this chip from a picnic to your anthill and suddenly you're putting cubes of sugar into this guy's tea, I just feel like it must be uncomfortable for them. But I also think maybe I'm overthinking it. Now that I think about it, I learned a while ago about, I don't remember what it's called. It might be like a death circle or something, but ants follow, I don't know what to call it. So I'm going to call it the smell, but they follow like the smell of the other ants. So if one ant goes in a circle, then the other ants are going to follow them into the circle and then they just walk until they die and they're like unable to break out of it. So maybe they just follow their instinct more than they care about the fact that they were just carrying a chip to their anthole. I don't know. I'm probably overthinking it, but I just wanted to ask. Anyway, this isn't really a logic hole but I liked the way that it continued on like this. So at the end of Age of Ultron, we see the new Avengers facility and everyone's in it, and Falcon is staying there. So in this movie, Hank is like, Scott, you have to go to this old abandoned thing to get my tech. And Scott's like, okay, easy. And then he goes and it's this brand new Avengers facility and Falcon is there. I like when things are like little continuations like that. And for me, I know that the episodes come out like weeks in between, but I watched Age of Ultron and Ant-Man back to back. Age of Ultron one day, Ant-Man the next day. And so for me, it's very immediate the way that the Avengers facility is brand new. They just made it. The new Avengers are staying there. And then the very next movie, Ant-Man is trying to break into this brand new Avengers facility. So I really liked that. Anyway, speaking of the Falcon and the way that things lead up into other movies, I really liked that Sam fought Scott. Like Scott was stealing from Avengers facility. But then in the end credits, Sam was like, no, I know someone who can be on our side when he's talking to Steve. And he is asking about Scott, which I think is really interesting that they fought and he's like, he's kind of okay at fighting, so he could probably be on our team, especially because Scott was so excited to be in the presence of Sam and like an Avenger, and he was like, I'm kind of an Avenger myself if you think about it. I just think it's really sweet, and I like the lead up to that and the way that the Falcon is looking for Scott for Civil War, which is our next movie. So it was just very exciting to me that the way that they all led up to each other like that, you know? Also, I just want to point out, I was trying not to say it all at once, but as I was typing in my notes, I was like, Sam, Scott, Steve, Sam, Scott, Steve. That's too much S's for me. It's pretty difficult. Anyway, I also like that at the end, they show us that Hank and Hope are starting to work on the Wasp suit, which becomes Hope's suit in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I like that it's just a very small nod to the fact that Hope will be coming back. I like it when we don't have to assume that they just made this suit. You know what I mean? Like it shows that they are starting to work on this suit, as opposed to the next time we see Ant-Man and there's just this brand new Wasp suit and we don't even know where it came from. We just assume that they made it in between the time. So I really like that as well. The last few questions I have. The first one is that Hank says that wearing the suit for so many years took a toll on his body. I don't remember if we learn about what that means or what that is in later movies. We honestly might. I feel like I have a vague memory of it, but I may be making that memory up. I don't know. But I'm wondering if we don't learn about it later, is he lying so that he doesn't have to risk wearing the suit, or just because he's old and doesn't want to talk about being old? Or does he not care that he's risking Scott's health? Either way, I'm not loving it, but I wonder why he feels okay risking Scott for that, because within like a few days, Scott is shrinking so often, and then he wears it for several years in the quantum realm, which I guess time works different in the quantum realm. And then he wears it after that too, like as an Avenger. It just feels like they don't really care about Scott's health, which is kind of sad. And then in Civil War, when he grows, which is a thing that I think they've been practicing before that movie, he said, do they not care? And that's kind of rude if they don't care, because all Scott wants to do is watch his kid grow up. And if he's sick, that's not nice. So anyway, I'm just wondering like what is going to happen to Scott later on, I guess. I suppose we'll find out, or we won't, but I'm intrigued. Anyway, the last thing I have, and y'all know it's coming, who fixes their house? When a giant Thomas the Tank Engine crashes through the roof and onto the lawn, who's going to fix that? And I know that they can shrink Thomas the Tank Engine, but the people who don't know that they can do that are like, where the fuck do I put this giant toy? I just think people don't pay attention to this kind of stuff enough. I think we need to talk about it more. So I guess next time you're watching any movie, really pay attention to all of the casualties in the background, because now that I'm thinking about it, why are we so immune to that? I feel like that's a little fucked as a society. We should be less immune to the fact that in the background of movies, there are casualties. That just feels like wiring our brain a certain way, but I don't want to talk about it anymore. So anyway, on to the technicalities. The first one I have, and it's a very small thing and it probably only bothers me, but for whatever reason, Hope's hair in this movie bothers me so much. I'm assuming it's a wig that they gave her, but they did her dirty. Either way, I just don't like it. I don't know if it's just that I'm used to the actress having her long hair, or like the long hair that she has in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but to me, her hair in this movie feels like Hope is wearing a wig. You know what I mean? Like she's undercover working for Darren, and so she's wearing a wig. But she's not. They know that she's Hope and she's Scott's daughter. That's her hair. And I don't know why it bothers me so much. It just doesn't fit her. And it looks fake. It looks like she's wearing like a bob wig. It just doesn't look good on her, I think. And maybe it's only me, but that's how I feel. So back to Louise. I just want to say the way that they've decided to show him telling stories is so funny to me. I love the idea of lip syncing over people talking. It's like drunk history. I love that shit. And I love that he's kind of all over the place, and the way he tells his story is so informal, but it gets the job done in a weird roundabout way. He's just, it's like, I just feel it deeply, I think, because I probably have a touch of ADHD or something similar, where my stories don't go in a straight line and people are like, okay, please cut to the chase. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, I will. And then I just keep going. I don't know. I just love it. And I love the way that it's like his talking style on other people who probably don't talk that way, you know, like when he's telling the story of the Falcon looking for Scott and the journalist lady is like, yeah, he's got mad skills or something like that. It's just so funny. You wouldn't expect her to talk like that. You know what I mean? Speaking of the Falcon though, I really love when movies have cameos like that, because he's talking to someone over an earpiece or whatever, people in the Avengers facility when Scott is fighting him, and he's talking about what Scott is and what they're doing and like they're fighting and everything. I don't know. But I think it's really funny to think about from an outside perspective. He was a cameo for the movie. They probably were like, let's get some sort of Avenger to be at the Avengers facility. And Sam is kind of like a minor Avenger, so it probably was easier to get him in the movie. But I think it's funny to think about, and maybe it's just me, but like Sam isn't talking to anyone. No one's in that building. If you really think about it, they didn't get anyone to be like, okay, Sam, go left, go right, or like you take him out, figure it out, whatever. Like he's not talking to anybody, which I think is really funny. And I don't know why it comes to mind when I watch this movie, but it's just so silly to think about. No one's in that building. It's just Sam. Anyway, these are just some small things with Scott being small. I really like the sounds that he makes when he hits things with his whole body, like the dink when he falls onto the roof of that guy's car when he first tries on the suit, and it like pink when it hits the roof, or when he's in the magnifying place where the yellow jacket suit was and he's trying to break the glass and you just hear a little pink in the background while Darren is talking and it's his whole body being thrown against the glass. I think it's so funny. I also think it's really funny when he's small and he's trying to run from the people before the building blows up, and he's running on that little model and everything is his size. It's like he's running in the building. I just think that's really interesting. Anyway, when the building does blow up though, it was so cool, the concept of how it blew up, because they're blowing up the particles that shrink things. And I think it does make sense that when you blow up those particles, it would kind of trigger the particles to do something. So the building becomes, I don't want to say black hole, but like something similar to that. It just like implodes in on itself and shrinks. And I'm imagining that it's shrinking way too small where we can't see it, or maybe like continuously shrinking. It's in the quantum realm or something. But it's just so interesting. And it is ideal that that would be the way, because there are people like on the outskirts of the building. And so you wouldn't want them to be hit with anything or part of the explosion. So it's kind of nice that the whole building just very neatly wraps itself up in this little void and just boop, disappears. I really liked that concept. The last thing I have for the technicalities, and this isn't really anything important, but I was on my phone while the credits were rolling waiting for the end credit scene. And I just happened to glance up and I saw that they thank Thomas the Tank Engine, like the corporation. And I don't know why, but I found that really funny. It makes sense that they would do that. That's how business works, I guess. But it's just so funny, the idea of this like giant Marvel movie that is a part of this whole big MCU is like, thank you, Thomas the Tank Engine. We thank you for your characters. So anyway, that's all I have for the technicalities. Moving on to the most chaotic moment. The most chaotic moment for me, I think, is when Scott catches up to Darren's helicopter. Darren puts on the yellow jacket suit and they're fighting in the briefcase. And he's like, I'm going to disintegrate you. And Siri's like, playing Disintegration by The Cure. And it's this like light, airy song. And it's this very intense scene, but they're small and there's like giant lifesavers. It just, the contrast of like them being so itty bitty, but their force is powerful and it's a dramatic fight scene, but they're really small. And then they fall out of the plane in the suitcase and they just like bloop into the pool. And then they get bigger and they're fighting again and it's scary. And then it shows them small fighting in Cassie's little toy thing with Thomas the Tank Engine. And Scott's running in the really tall carpet and they're fighting and it's scary and it's like, oh my God, who's gonna win? And it's very dramatic. And then they're about to get hit by a train and we're like, oh God, that's a huge train, it's coming after him. Thomas is really scary, his eyes are moving back and forth. And then it zooms out and it just boop, the train falls over, like it just hit a little tiny pebble or something. It's so chaotic in the way that like It's a really epic fight scene, and it keeps zooming out to show us how small they are and how not insignificant, but it just is so interesting to see what everybody else is seeing. You know what I mean? Like, we're seeing it up close and personal, Scott and Darren fighting, and it's very scary, and Darren's like really crazy. But then it zooms out and it's like this tiny little Thomas the Tank Engine that a little girl plays with is like, oops, I fell over. I just think it's really funny the way that when the perspective changed, the stakes kind of change, you know? Like, they're falling from the sky and it's really scary, and then they just go boop into a pool. Anyway, that's all I have. So thank you for watching and or listening. And if you'd like to follow me on Instagram or on TikTok, I am at PHILM PHUCKERY. And if you are listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, just know that this podcast exists on both as Philm Phuckery with a PH for both. If you are enjoying listening to it, it would be very helpful if you were to comment, like, subscribe, download, share it with your friends, listen to episodes over again if you can handle it. Listen to me talk about a whole lot of nothing while you're doing chores around the house, while you're going on road trips, whatever people do when they listen to podcasts. And I just want to remind y'all that my commercial episode is coming up in 2 weeks. So next week is going to be Captain America Civil War, and then after that will be a commercial episode. I still haven't fully decided what it's going to be. I'm kind of leaning towards Glass Onion, but if y'all have suggestions, please let me know. You can comment, you can message me on social media, whatever you feel is right to you. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you have a wonderful week. And just remember that Baskin Robbins always finds out. Okay, love you, bye.